Some files return even when they were never meant to. I've said that sentence to myself for years, quietly, in my head, sometimes under my breath when I pass the old shelves at the firm or when I'm alone in an archive room longer than I plan to be. Tonight, I'm saying it to you. Before I open this file with you, let me ask you something. If stories like this stay with you, if you want to follow this case all the way to the very last page, then subscribe and stay close. I don't tell these stories lightly, and once we begin this one, you will want to know how it ends. Some files return even when they were never meant to. I'm sitting in my study as I speak. It's late. The kind of late where even the city forgets to make noise. The only light in this room comes from the old brass lamp on my desk. It has a small crack at the base from the time I knocked it over reaching for a ringing phone years ago. The shade throws a warm circle of yellow over my notes, my pens, the glass of water I haven't touched, and the one thing that does not belong here, a beige case file. It rests in the exact center of the desk, right where I put my hands when I'm thinking. That would be ordinary if this were any other file, but 14 years ago I lost this one. Not misplaced, not moved. Lost. There is a difference. I let my fingertips hover just above the cover, close enough to feel the texture of the cardboard but not quite touching. The label on the spine is slightly frayed, the corners softened from use. Someone once handled this file a lot. That someone was me. I don't need to read the name to know who it belongs to. But the lamplight catches the faint ink anyway. State versus Daniel Moore. The letters are still legible, even after all this time. The old courthouse sticker is clinging to one corner like a stubborn memory. This file is a piece of my past I never expected to hold again. You might think I'm being dramatic over stationery, but understand this: lawyers don't remember all their cases. We remember the ones that went right, the ones that went wrong, and the ones that never got the ending they deserved. This is the last kind. 14 years ago, this file vanished from a locked cabinet in my locked office inside a locked building. That same night, the man whose name is on this cover, Daniel Moore, vanished too. The case collapsed. The questions remained, and I was left with something lawyers don't like to talk about in public: doubt. I take a slow breath and finally rest my hand on the file. It's real, it has weight. It's not a memory and it's not a dream, it's here again. You and I are strangers. You know my voice now, but you don't know my life. So before I show you what's inside this file, let me tell you who Daniel Moore was and why this case never let me go. I first met Daniel in a different office, with a different view and a younger version of myself behind the desk. I can still see him. A man in his early 30s, neatly dressed but not polished, with a tie that didn't quite match his shirt. Not because he lacked taste, but because he hadn't expected his life to need a lawyer in it. He sat on the edge of the chair, not fully leaning back, not fully settled. His hands were folded together so tightly that his knuckles were nearly white. He kept glancing at the door every few minutes, as if expecting someone from his office to appear and say, "All right, joke's over, come back to work." He introduced himself, but I had already read his name on the documents. Daniel Moore, financial analyst, internal reporting team. "Miss Hayes, I didn't do this," he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the strain hiding underneath. "Someone is changing the numbers, but it's not me. I just happened to be the one standing closest when they started looking." I've heard similar words many times. People say they're innocent in many different ways. Some are defensive, some angry, some resigned. Daniel's tone was different. He sounded tired, like he had been trying to explain himself for a long time before he ever reached my office. I remember the way he looked at the folder I had in front of me back then, the early version of this very file. The complaint from his company, the internal audit summary that flagged irregular report entries and suspicious alterations. "I know those documents," he said softly. "I wrote some of those reports. But not the ones you're holding?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "They're using my name on changes I didn't make," he replied. "Someone else is accessing the system, someone higher." That word lodged in my mind and never quite left. We went through the details, dates, times, access logs, emails. The company's narrative was simple. The problem started after Daniel joined. Therefore, Daniel was the problem. But when I asked for full access logs, approval chains, senior sign-offs, I noticed something that made me pause. There were gaps. Tiny ones, 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Just enough for someone to slip in, alter a figure, and slip back out, leaving the digital trail pointing at the last person who opened the file, Daniel. He watched my face carefully as I read. "You see it, don't you?" he said. "There's someone else in there?" I didn't answer him then, not directly. Lawyers don't promise what they can't deliver, and they don't confirm what they can't yet prove. But inside, I felt that familiar shift, that moment when a case moves from maybe to this needs to be tested. I took this file home back then too. Read it late at night, made notes in the margins, underlined inconsistencies, circled dates, added question marks that only I would understand. In those days, I believed that if you worked hard enough, followed the paper trail, asked the right questions, you could get to the bottom of things. I still believe that, mostly, but this file tried to teach me otherwise. The night before the hearing, I remember leaving my office later than usual. I locked the cabinet myself. I checked the handle twice. The hallway outside was empty. Lights dimmed to that strange half-brightness buildings use when they expect only cleaners and late workers to be around. I went home, carrying the weight of the upcoming day in my shoulders and the silent hope that tomorrow I could prove something was wrong with the story the company was selling. I expected to walk into court with this file in my hands, with Daniel at my side, with a plan. Instead, I walked into my office the next morning, turned the key in the cabinet, opened it, and found a space where the file used to be. No stacks tipped over, no broken lock, no papers scattered, just empty. You know that feeling when your mind says, "No, that can't be right," and your body goes cold before you even form the next thought. That was me standing in front of an open cabinet with nothing inside. I remember searching the office, the desk, the other shelves, my briefcase, even the trash, nothing. Within an hour, the whispers started, administrative staff looking concerned. A colleague half joking, "Misplaced something important, Hayes." The senior officer, Mark Ridley, standing in my doorway with arms folded, saying, "If the file's gone, there isn't much left to do, is there?" I called Daniel. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. By midday, I was in court with no client, no file, and no room to move. There is a particular kind of silence in a courtroom when everyone realizes nothing is going to happen. Papers are shuffled, pens are capped, chairs move slightly, everyone prepares to leave. On the record, the judge wrote one line that day, "Case dismissed, insufficient documentation." And just like that, it was over, officially. Unofficially, it was the beginning of a question that hung over me for 14 years. What happened to Daniel? Who touched that file? Who decided this case would not see daylight? I could never answer those questions. Until this morning. The memory fades and I'm back here in my study, hands resting on the same file I once guarded so carefully and then lost completely. I open it now. The familiar smell of old paper lifts into the air, ink, dust, and the faint trace of a courthouse I haven't visited in months. The first page is exactly as it used to be. The formal heading, the case number, the date, the names of the parties involved. I turn the pages slowly. Complaint, internal report summary, audit excerpts, staff memo, my own old notes on the side. Cross-check access times, request full approval chain, ask who benefited from these changes. Each page is a step back into a time when I still thought I could fix this. Then between two old pages that I know too well, there is something new. The paper is slightly less yellowed. The edges are sharper. The print is cleaner. At the top, in neat typed letters, is a date, not from 2009. From the present, 14 years after this case died on paper, I feel my heartbeat slow down instead of speed up. That's what age does. The shock goes deeper, not faster. I read the lines carefully. This new page is written like a brief internal note. No court seal, no firm letterhead, just text. It references a meeting that never took place, an internal review that was never scheduled. And at the bottom, in careful pen ink, is a signature, Daniel Moore. The ink is dark, unfaded. I sit back in my chair. The wood creaks slightly under the shift of weight. The room suddenly feels smaller. There are rules about evidence, even in a story like this. Files don't disappear and then reappear with extra pages. Documents don't sign themselves. Names of people no one has seen in years don't suddenly materialize in fresh ink. And yet here it is. I go further toward the back of the file, needing to know, is this the only intrusion or are there more? Near the end, I find my own handwriting. That by itself isn't surprising. I write on my files all the time. Questions, thoughts, reminders, alerts. But this line, look at the numbers again, you were right the first time. I read it twice. 3 times, the curve of the letters, the slight downward tilt of the last word. Even the way the ink hesitates where I must have lifted the pen for a second, it all looks like me. But I never wrote this. I remember doubting myself back then, wondering if I had pushed too hard. If I had believed Daniel too much, too early. If I had missed something obvious. I do not remember ever writing, you were right the first time. If I'd written that in 2009, it would have changed everything about how I saw the dismissal. Instead, I carried the opposite thought for years. What did I get wrong? Someone is using my handwriting. Or someone had access to a version of me I don't remember being. Some files return even when they were never meant to. I hear my own voice say it again. This time it sounds less like a phrase and more like a warning. I close the file gently and look around my study. Nothing is out of place. The same framed certificates on the wall. The same bookshelf lined with volumes I've half memorized. The same ticking clock on the far side of the room, steady and indifferent. If you walked in right now, you would say this is a normal room, owned by a normal lawyer with a normal life. Only you and I know that on this desk lies a piece of the past that shouldn't be here, and yet is. You might be wondering why I didn't call anyone. Why I didn't report this file appearing in my home. I could say it's because I didn't want to sound irrational, or because I didn't trust the system that let it vanish in the first place. Both would be true, but the real reason is simpler. I wanted to see what was inside it before anyone else did. And now that I have, I can tell you this much. This is no longer just about a missing file and a vanished analyst. Whoever put this back on my desk wants me to look again. Wants us to look again, so here is what we're going to do. In the next part, we are going to go back properly this time, to the first irregular number. to the first conversation Daniel and I had behind closed doors. To the first time I noticed a small, quiet gap in the evidence and told myself it was nothing. We're going to rebuild this case from the ground up. Slowly, carefully, page by page. And then we're going to find out why this file came back now. If you're still here, still listening, still curious, stay with me. Make sure you're subscribed, make sure you can find your way back to this story, because once we open the next part, we'll be stepping into a timeline that someone tried very hard to erase. And the first thing we're going to ask is very simple. Why was Daniel Moore so sure the numbers weren't his? I thought I knew the answer back then. I was wrong. Some files return, even when they were never meant to. I repeat that line under my breath as I sit with the file open in front of me, because to understand why its return is impossible, I have to take you back to the night it disappeared. Memory is a strange thing. It dulls the noise but sharpens the moments that mattered. I remember that evening far too well. I was younger, sharper, the kind of lawyer who believed she could outthink systems built long before her. I stayed in the office later than usual, sitting under a fluorescent light that flickered every few minutes, reviewing the last set of statements before the hearing. Daniel had come by earlier with a box of documents he said he found tucked behind an old cabinet at work. He looked tired, truly tired, as if the case had already aged him. He stood in my doorway, one hand gripping the box like it carried his entire future. "Miss Hayes, I think someone knew I'd look here," he said, almost whispering. I took the box, placed it beside the file, and tried to offer him some reassurance. I told him the same thing I had been telling myself for weeks. If the truth is in the numbers, we'll find it. He nodded, but there was fear in his eyes, fear I didn't fully recognize until much later. He left with a quiet "thank you," and I watched him walk down the hallway, his figure shrinking in the dim corridor until he rounded the corner and was gone. That was the last time I ever saw him. By the time I finished reviewing everything, it was almost midnight. The cleaning staff had long since left, and the building had that hollow silence that only old offices can produce, like a space holding its breath. I placed the file back into the cabinet myself and locked it. I remember hearing the click of the metal, a sound that should have felt like reassurance but instead settled uneasily in my stomach. I gathered my things, switched off the lamp on my desk, and walked out of the office. The hallway lights were on motion sensors. They lit up in patches as I moved through them, each section of brightness shrinking behind me until only the elevator's dull button glowed in the dark. I pressed it, waited, and for a brief second felt the uneasy sensation of being watched through the quiet glass of the office doors. I told myself it was nerves. Every lawyer gets them the night before a complicated hearing. The next morning, everything felt wrong before I even unlocked my door. Call it instinct or experience or the 100 small signals your mind can't explain but your body obeys. I stepped inside, breathing in the scent of paper and stale coffee, and walked directly to the cabinet. The key turned smoothly, the lock unharmed, the door swung open, and there was nothing. Not a single folder inside. The shelf was bare, too bare, wiped clean, like someone wanted the absence to be obvious. Files don't slide out. They don't vanish on their own, and nobody else had a key except me. I remember standing there for a long moment, staring at the empty space as if the file might reappear if I simply closed and reopened the door. It didn't. I searched the room, then the hallway, then the entire floor. I asked the security guard if anyone had come in overnight. He shook his head, pointed to the monitors, and said the cameras showed nothing except a flicker around 2:15 a.m. "A glitch," he said. old wiring. But that glitch lasted just long enough for someone to slip through. Back in my office, I sank into my chair, feeling the kind of helplessness I had never felt in my career. Without the file, Daniel's case had no legs. Without Daniel, who didn't show up for the hearing and didn't answer any calls, it had no witness. His apartment later turned up half-emptied, as if someone had left in a hurry or been made to leave. By midday, I stood in a courtroom with empty hands, facing a judge whose patience dissolved with every word the opposing counsel didn't have to say. Case dismissed. Insufficient documentation. I heard those words as if they were being spoken underwater. And then it was over, on paper at least. What I didn't know then was that the file wasn't destroyed. It wasn't thrown away. It wasn't forgotten. It was elsewhere, somewhere someone thought it needed to be kept. For 14 years, I avoided thinking about it. Some cases live as a quiet ache in the back of your mind. This one was a wound I learned to walk with. But when I found the file on my desk this morning, when I saw the new page, the new date, and Daniel's signature in ink that hasn't aged a day, I realized something that shook me more than the empty cabinet had all those years ago. Someone has been keeping this file alive. Someone who knows the truth didn't die with the dismissal. Someone who wants me to see what I didn't see then. That night, the night the file vanished, I missed something small, something quiet. Something that waited 14 years to return to me. And in the next part, we're going to uncover what that was, starting with a number Daniel tried to show me on his very last day. Some files return, even when they were never meant to. I whisper it again as I lean back in my chair, because part 3 of this story doesn't begin on my desk, or in my office, or even in that locked cabinet. It begins with a single number Daniel Moore tried to show me 14 years ago, a number I dismissed, not because it wasn't important, but because I didn't understand what he was trying to tell me. Before his disappearance, before the file vanished, he came to my office with a printout in his hand, folded so many times the edges had softened into threads. He placed it on my desk with the kind of care people use when setting down something fragile, something that could hurt if dropped too quickly. This, he said quietly, tapping the page, is where it all starts. I remember glancing at it, just a standard transaction timestamp, a meaningless cluster of digits to anyone who wasn't living inside his panic. It's just a time entry, Daniel, I told him. He shook his head, eyes fixed on mine with an urgency I didn't understand then. No, he said, it's the only entry they couldn't delete. I didn't know what he meant, not yet. As I hold the returned file now, that number feels heavier than anything else inside it. I find the original audit log page, the one I photocopied myself back then, and run my thumb over the timestamp Daniel circled. 2:17 and 43 seconds. A strange time, too late for scheduled reports, too early for system resets. At the time, I thought Daniel was overthinking it, seeing patterns where there were none. He told me that all irregular entries happened in that window, always around 2:17 in the morning, but every time the company submitted documents to the court, the logs around that time were missing. Every single time. Someone is pulling numbers out at night, he said. Someone with clearance higher than mine. I should have listened. I should have pressed harder. I should have asked why a financial team would need access to the internal reporting system at a time of day when the only people awake were cleaning staff and security guards. But I didn't. And now, 14 years later, that same timestamp appears in the returned file on a page that didn't exist before. It sits alone in the center of a blank sheet, written not in typed numbers but in pen, the same pen someone used to forge my handwriting. 2:17 and 43 seconds. Nothing else. No context, no heading, just the time. I stare at it, remembering Daniel's voice, his exhaustion, the way he looked at me like he was hoping I'd understand something he couldn't fully explain. I flip back through the file and notice something I missed earlier. On one of the pages added recently, the timestamp appears again in the margin, faintly, like someone wrote it in a hurry. Why keep writing the same number? Why insist on it after 14 years? I close the file and lean back in my chair, letting the room settle into silence. Then something occurs to me, something I should have realized the moment that number reappeared. The security guard's glitch on the camera system back then happened around the same time. He said the monitor flickered for a few seconds. I didn't connect the dots then, but I see them clearly now. Someone used the system blackout to enter the building. Someone who knew exactly when the cameras looped or froze. Someone who had access to the digital logs and the authority to erase them. I stand up and walk to the window of my study, the city lights blurred behind the fogged glass. I remember Daniel sitting across from me, his voice trembling as he said, "If I disappear, please don't let them close this without looking at the numbers again." Back then, I took it as a nervous man protecting his last shred of dignity. But now, it feels like a warning, like he knew something, like he saw something he was never supposed to see. I return to my desk and place the timestamp page on top of the file. 2:17 and 43 seconds. The one thing no one deleted. The one thing someone secretly added back in. The one thing that survived from the night everything else vanished. I realize slowly, painfully, that this number is the thread Daniel left for me long before the file was taken. A thread he must have hoped I would eventually follow. The truth is, I didn't follow it then, but I'm following it now. And the first step begins with a question no one asked 14 years ago. Who else was in the building at 2:17 a.m.? When I turn the file back over, I notice something I somehow missed before, a faint indentation on the last page. Not writing, pressing. As if someone wrote something on a sheet placed on top of it. I tilt the paper into the lamplight and I see it. A name. Pressed so lightly it's almost invisible but still there. A name I haven't said in years. A name tied to the highest clearance in Daniel's department. A name that makes my breath catch in my throat. Mark Ridley. The man who insisted the case be dismissed. And suddenly the number makes perfect sense. Some files return, even when they were never meant to. I say it softly as I stare at the faint indentation of Mark Ridley's name pressed into the last page of the file. The lamp hums beside me, its warm pool of light the only thing holding back the thick quiet of my study. Mark Ridley. 14 years ago, he was the senior compliance officer assigned to supervise Daniel's case. A man with a rigid jaw, colder eyes, and a voice that carried the weight of authority in every hallway. He was the one who said, "This case isn't worth the firm's time." He was the one who insisted the internal logs were complete when they clearly weren't. And he was the one who arrived too quickly that morning when the file disappeared, standing in my doorway before I'd even processed the empty cabinet. His presence had always felt like an answer to a question I hadn't dared to ask. Now, seeing his name pressed into the paper like a ghost signature, I finally ask it. What was Mark doing at 2:17 a.m.? I flip through the file again, searching for anything that might connect him to Daniel beyond what I already knew. But the truth is, in the original case, Ridley's name barely appeared. Just a brief mention here, a compliance note there, nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But in the returned file, in the version someone reconstructed in secret, his presence is everywhere. Margins, footnotes, dates, timestamps. Someone wanted me to see him now, not then. Someone wanted his name to surface only after enough time had passed that he'd believe the past was safely buried. I exhale slowly, close the file, and reach for my coat. There is a place I need to see again. The east wing of the old courthouse, specifically room 412. It hasn't been used in more than a decade, sealed off during a renovation project that was never completed. I hadn't stepped foot there since the year after Daniel's disappearance, when the incident was too raw to revisit, and my questions were dismissed as emotional overreach. Tonight, though, the air feels different. The silence in the corridors seems to hum with something alive. I unlock the east entrance and step inside. The lights flicker on in long, trembling strips, chasing shadows along the tiled floor until they settle into a dull, steady glow. Room 412 sits at the very end of the hallway, a heavy wooden door with a frosted glass panel that still carries the faded imprint of a department name scraped off long ago. I stop in front of it and place my hand on the handle. The metal is colder than it should be. When I push the door open, it groans softly, as if complaining about being disturbed after so many years. The room is dim, but not as abandoned as it should be. Dust covers most surfaces, but not the center table, not entirely. A chair is pulled slightly away, angled as if someone had been sitting there recently. And on the table sits a half-full glass of water, its surface still enough to reflect the yellow light spilling in from the corridor. A glass with condensation that hasn't dried. A glass that wasn't here 14 years ago. I step closer, the old floorboards creaking beneath my weight. The air smells faintly of old paper and something else, something colder, metallic, like the scent of air that's been trapped too long. A single sheet of paper lies in the center of the table. I pick it up carefully. It contains only 3 words, "You missed something." The handwriting is familiar, too familiar, it's mine, or at least it looks exactly like mine. But I have never been in this room before. Not once. My pulse steadies, but in that quiet way where fear becomes clarity. If someone forged my handwriting inside the file, they could forge it here too. Someone wants me to follow a trail they prepared. Someone wants me to feel like I'm retracing steps I never took, steps someone else designed for me long ago. I walk along the wall, letting the thin layer of dust tell its stories. Footprints scatter faintly through the room, not clear, not recent, but present enough to say, someone else has been here more than once. And then I see it, a patch on the floor where the dust is thinner, the boards slightly shifted, like something heavy was dragged or lifted. I crouch down, touch the gap between 2 planks, and feel a cool draft slipping through. A hidden compartment. I pull at the boards until one loosens enough to lift. Beneath it is a narrow, dark cavity, and inside it lies a small metal box with a tarnished latch. My breath hitches as I lift it out. The weight is familiar, the shape unmistakable. It's a courthouse evidence box. And on the top, barely visible through the grime, are the faint remnants of a label. Case more confidential. I close my hands around the box. The dust shifts. The room settles. Outside the frosted glass window of the door, I see it, a shadow. Slow, steady, unmistakably human. Standing, watching, I freeze. The shadow doesn't move. It doesn't step forward. It doesn't leave. It just watches. And then, in one blink, it's gone. I clutch the evidence box tighter and breathe out, slow and controlled. Whoever was there, whoever has been leaving these clues, they are closer than I imagined. Close enough to stand behind that glass. Close enough to know I'd come here tonight. Close enough to leave before I could open the door. I look back at the table, at the half-full glass of water that still holds the faintest tremble, as if someone set it down minutes before I arrived. Someone knew I would come to room 412. Someone has been waiting. When I lift the evidence box into my arms and turn to leave the room, one thought settles through my mind with the cold certainty of truth. Whoever disappeared the file 14 years ago never left. Some files return, even when they were never meant to. I whisper the line again as I carry the old evidence box out of room 412, the metal cold against my palms, heavier than I remember boxes of this size ever being. The hallway behind me feels different now, not just empty, but alert, like the building itself is aware of me, aware of the secrets leaving that sealed room after 14 silent years. I keep walking, each step echoing too loudly, the sound bouncing between the walls like a quiet alarm no one but me can hear. The shadow I saw behind the frosted glass keeps replaying in my mind. Someone stood there. Someone watched me find the box. Someone left that half-full glass of water on the table. Someone wanted me to see the message, "You missed something." But whoever they were, they disappeared the second I turned toward them, and that, more than anything, tells me they have been watching this case much longer than I assumed. I reach my study and set the evidence box gently on the desk, brushing away the thin layer of dust still clinging to the lid. Its latch is tarnished stiff, as though it hasn't been opened since the day it was packed. I sit down, take a slow breath, and unhook the clasp. The lid creaks open reluctantly, as if the box itself doesn't want to be disturbed. Inside, there are several items smaller than I expected, but somehow more meaningful because of that. A USB drive, a folded sheet of paper, a torn corner from what looks like an evidence log, and on top of everything else, a single sealed envelope with my name written across it in handwriting I recognize instantly. Daniel Moore. My throat tightens, a dull ache building in my chest. 14 years ago, Daniel left my office with worry in his eyes, fear in his voice, and a file full of questions he couldn't answer. Now his name sits on the envelope in front of me, a name written with a hand that hasn't been seen since the night he disappeared. The ink is slightly faded, but the pressure of the strokes suggests someone wrote it with urgency, almost forcefully, like they weren't sure how much time they had. I open the envelope carefully, sliding out a single sheet of paper, old, yellowed at the edges, creased down the center as if folded for a long time. And just like the note left in room 412, this page contains only a few words. But these are different, these sting, these breathe, these sound like Daniel's voice echoing through 14 silent years. If they find this before you, it won't matter. If you find this, follow the numbers. Follow the numbers. The same thing he tried to show me. The same thing tied to that strange timestamp, 2:17 and 43 seconds, the only entry the company couldn't erase. I set the note down and reach for the USB drive, hesitating for just a moment before plugging it into my laptop. The screen flickers, loads, stalls, then finally displays a single folder labeled, "Do not ignore this time." Inside the folder is one video file, no description, no date stamp, no name, just a number 211,743, the timestamp written without colon breaks. My heart thuds softly, steady and slow as I press play. The video is grainy, taken from a hallway security camera, not polished, not official, not part of any archive I ever had. It shows a corridor lit by harsh white fluorescence, the timestamp blinking in the corner. I lean closer, adjusting the volume though there's no sound. And then I see it, a figure entering the hallway at 2:17 a.m., moving quickly, looking over his shoulder. It's Daniel. His face is tense, eyes darting to the corners as if he knows he has only minutes. His hands grip a folder, this folder, and he moves with urgency toward a storage room, glancing behind him every few seconds. I watch him rush to a shelf, slide the file into a hidden gap behind other boxes, and pull a small evidence box, the very one now on my desk, from a lower shelf. He hesitates, looks directly at the camera as if trying to communicate something without words, and then the footage glitches. For a moment, the screen turns black, then it flashes. Then returns for just a second, enough to catch a glimpse of another figure entering the hallway. A taller man, a darker suit, a distinct posture, Mark Ridley. The footage ends there abruptly, like someone cut the recording on purpose. I sit back slowly, staring at the frozen last frame, Daniel hiding the file, Ridley walking in seconds later. The glitch Ridley claimed was old wiring the morning after everything vanished. It wasn't wiring, it was him. I turn my attention back to the box and pull out the folded sheet of paper lying beneath the USB. It's a partial printout, the top half of a witness statement, torn off before it could be filed. The name of the person giving the statement is missing, but the text is enough to stop my breath. I saw Mr. Moore place the file in the east storage room. He told me it was the only way to keep the numbers safe. There's no signature. No date, just that one line, and at the bottom, pressed lightly like a ghost fingerprint, the same time Daniel circled for me all those years ago. 2:17 and 43 seconds. I fold the paper back, place it on the desk, and stare at the evidence box, my mind weaving the threads together with a clarity I did not have 14 years ago. Daniel didn't run, Daniel didn't hide. He tried to save the truth, and someone found him before morning came. Someone who knew the system better than he did. Someone who held more authority. Someone whose name I had buried under layers of professional courtesy and the desire to forget. Mark Ridley. And now, as the clock in my study clicks past midnight, as the evidence box sits open and the file lies heavy beside it, I realize something else, something colder, quieter, more dangerous. If Ridley stopped Daniel 14 years ago, then Ridley knows this file is back. And the person who left that glass of water in room 412 might not be Daniel at all. Some files return, even when they were never meant to. I murmur the words again as the clock on the wall ticks into the earliest hours of morning, each quiet second slipping past like a reminder that whatever I'm uncovering now has waited 14 years to breathe. The open evidence box sits beside the returned file, the USB drive still warm from the video I just watched. Grainy footage of Daniel Moore slipping through a hallway at 2:17 a.m., hiding the file as if it were the last thing keeping him alive. And behind him, entering the frame with a confidence that chills me even now in the safety of my study, was Mark Ridley. The senior officer who insisted the case be dismissed, the man who found nothing unusual, the same person whose name was pressed into the final page of the file like a silent confession. I look at the timestamp again, 2:17 and 43 seconds, and feel something shift inside me, a click of understanding that had been missing all these years. This number isn't random. It's a hinge. A moment where two timelines touched each other and then violently split apart, one where the truth survived and one where it was buried. I spread the pages across my desk, the original documents and the newly appeared ones, creating a mosaic of contradictions and corrections. The old logs show gaps, those missing minutes where no one was supposed to be in the system. The reconstructed pages show perfectly filled sequences, as if someone patched the timeline after the fact, smoothing the edges to hide the very irregularities Daniel tried to expose. I begin reading them side by side, running my finger down each line like a detective comparing two versions of the same diary. On one page, the numbers show a minor deviation, something small enough to ignore but large enough to sink someone's career if placed carefully in front of the right judge. On the new page, the deviation is clean, corrected, and attributed to a name that never existed in the company's employee records. In one version, Daniel is the prime suspect. In the other, Daniel is invisible, removed entirely, as if someone tried to rewrite history without leaving fingerprints. My breath catches as the realization forms fully. Someone created a second version of the case, a clean version that could be used to explain away the irregularities if anyone ever asked about the original report. Two timelines, two truths, one real, one constructed. I lean back and rub my temples, feeling the weight of 14 years settling onto my shoulders like a long-delayed storm. The difference between the two timelines isn't subtle. It's deliberate, precise. Whoever wrote the new pages knew exactly what had been erased, and exactly how to replace it with a version that would silence every question Daniel tried to raise. This wasn't a cover-up made in panic. It was a cover-up crafted by someone who understood systems, numbers, and human behavior well enough to predict every possible inquiry. Someone who controlled the narrative then and thought they could control it forever. But the file returned. And files don't return on their own. I reach for the new handwritten message, follow the numbers. Daniel's voice feels alive in that sentence, echoing through the ink. He must have known he couldn't outrun the truth. He hid the file, hid the evidence box, and left just enough breadcrumbs to guide someone back when he no longer could. But what he didn't know was that the person he trusted to find it, me, would be blind to the one detail that mattered most. The timeline itself. I study the folder again, noticing something subtle I missed before. The older pages have a faint yellow tint, the kind paper gets after years of absorbing time and air. But the newly added pages are slightly different, not just newer but smoother, with a more modern print texture. When I hold them together, the file becomes a patchwork of two eras, stitched together by a hand I do not yet recognize. But their message is clear. The original case wasn't simply tampered with, it was rewritten. And whoever rewrote it didn't expect me to see both versions at the same time. My eyes drift to the torn witness statement, the one that says, "I saw Mr. Moore place the file in the east storage room." Who wrote this? Why tear the page before it was filed? And why hide it for me to find now? I turn the paper over, pressing lightly, hoping for another indentation like the one that revealed Ridley's name earlier. There is nothing, no imprint, no clue, just the uneven cut of a page torn in haste or maybe in fear. I realize then that the person who wrote this was trying to protect Daniel, but didn't have time to do more. That statement is half a truth, the first half of a confession someone wasn't allowed to finish. The building was closed when Daniel hid the file. No staff, no security shift change, no cleaners scheduled. So who saw him? Who wrote that statement? And why wasn't their existence ever mentioned during the investigation? I reach for the old case notes, scanning for overlooked names, custodial staff, evening security, clerical assistants. And then I see a name I had skimmed too quickly in the original version, Alina Carter, night records clerk. No contact details, no follow-up interview, Just one line confirming she delivered logs to Ridley the week the case was dismissed. She vanished from the staff list shortly after, transferred apparently. Or at least that's the word Ridley used. A cold realization settles into me. If Ridley was there at 2:17 a.m., if Daniel hid the file at 2:17 a.m., if Alina Carter was responsible for the logs, then someone else was in that building that night. Someone who saw everything, someone who may have left me these fragments, someone who might still be trying to speak silently through the dust. I sit up straighter, heart steady, mind sharpening with a clarity I haven't felt since the early years of my practice. Daniel didn't leave me clues, Alina might have, or Ridley might have left the ones he wanted me to see. 2 timelines, 2 truths, 2 storytellers, one alive, one missing, one unknown. I gather the pages in front of me, feeling the weight of the decision forming like a verdict. To solve this case, I need to find the person who wrote a statement they were never allowed to finish. I need to find Alina Carter. And if someone else has been watching me, if someone left water on that table, if someone stood behind that frosted glass tonight, then they already know that I've reached this point, and they will not want me going any further. Some files return, even when they were never meant to. The words leave my lips before I realize I've spoken them, carried out into the quiet of my study like a truth my mind has accepted long before my heart has. The pages in front of me, the originals, the rewrites, the torn statement, the timestamp repeated like a heartbeat, all point to one person. One name that vanished so quietly from the system that it barely left a trace. Alina Carter, the night records clerk who was in the building the week Daniel disappeared and the same week my file vanished. Her existence in the old documents is a faint pencil mark, barely there, easy to miss. But in a case built on omissions and silences, faint marks matter more than loud ones. If Daniel didn't leave those clues, if someone else hid this evidence for me, then Alina may be the only person who tried to speak and wasn't allowed to finish. I run my fingers over the torn witness statement again, feeling the uneven edge, the hurried rip, the urgency bleeding through the fibers. People don't tear evidence unless something is forcing their hand, fear, pressure, danger. And Alina had access to the logs. She would have seen the glitch. She would have seen Ridley in the building. She might have seen Daniel alive after midnight. And that means she knew exactly what was happening. I searched the public databases, the staff transfer lists, the archived roster entries, nothing. No mention of Alina after the year the case was dismissed. It's as if she walked out of the courthouse one afternoon and dissolved into air. But people don't disappear the same way files do. Someone hides files. People hide themselves. I glance at the clock. The hour is late enough that the city is wrapped in a quiet only night shift workers understand. I lock the evidence box again, not because I believe it keeps me safe, but because it gives me the illusion of order. The file lies open on my desk, the newly added pages glowing softly under the lamp. I trace my eyes over them, the corrected numbers, the forced handwriting, the artificial timeline someone built like a wall to keep the truth locked behind it. Ridley wanted this case to die. And someone, maybe Alina, maybe not, wanted it to live. A gust of wind presses gently against the window, shaking the curtain and carrying with it the sound of leaves rustling. I stand up and walk slowly through my study, the wooden floor creaking under my feet, every sound amplified in the stillness. My hand hovers over the shelf where I keep old case notes, and my eyes catch something I hadn't noticed before, a thin folder slightly out of line with the others. I pull it out, surprised to see that it carries no label, no name, a blank cover. Inside it is only one page. A photograph. I lift it closer to the light. It's an image from a courthouse hallway taken years ago. In it stands a woman with dark hair pulled back into a neat twist, wearing the records clerk badge, Alina Carter. She's speaking to Daniel. He's holding the same evidence box I just found in room 412. His face is tense, urgent. Alina is leaning in slightly, listening intently. Her expression is not fear, but concern. Someone captured this moment. Someone kept it. Someone placed it on my shelf. I breathe in slowly, feeling the weight of the photograph settle deep into my chest. Alina didn't vanish because she was uninvolved. She vanished because she was too close to the truth Ridley needed to bury. And now I have proof that she and Daniel were in that hallway together. The question isn't what Alina saw, it's what Alina knew. I sit back down, stare at the photo, and realize something haunting. The angle from which the photograph was taken could only come from a specific location, the far security alcove, a place only certain staff had access to. Not Daniel, not Alina, but Ridley did. My heart tightens. If Ridley took this photo, he kept it for a reason. If someone else took it, they hid it for a reason. Either way, this moment, captured and preserved, is too important to ignore. I turn the photo over, hoping for a name, a date, anything. Instead, there is only a faint indentation, and as I tilt it into the light, I see numbers pressed lightly into the back. 2:17 and 43 seconds again. Always again, I whisper to myself, Daniel wasn't just hiding evidence, he was meeting someone. I look closer at the photograph. Alina's hand is slightly raised as if she's handing Daniel something small. A key, a note, a drive. I can't tell, but I know this moment is the missing link. The truth doesn't hide for 14 years without leaving fractures in the story, and this photo is a fracture Ridley never expected to surface. As I place the photograph on the desk, a new emotion mixes with my confusion, anger. Not loud anger. Not the kind that shouts or breaks things. The quiet, heavy anger of someone who realizes they were manipulated into closing a door they should have kept open. I pick up the photo again, softer this time, and study Alina's face. She looks worried, determined, like someone who knows she won't get another chance. My throat tightens with a question I don't want to ask. If Alina tried to warn me 14 years ago, what happened to her after that? I stare at the timestamp pressed into the photo again, the numbers haunting every piece of evidence, every clue, every fragment left behind. And then something happens that freezes me completely. From somewhere inside my house, faint, distant, unmistakable, a floorboard creaks. Not from settling, not from the wind, from weight. Someone is inside. Some files return, even when they were never meant to. I whisper the line without thinking, my breath catching halfway through the sentence, because the sound I just heard in my house is not a memory, it is movement. Real, present, close. A floorboard creaked somewhere beyond my study, soft, delicate, but with just enough pressure to tell me one chilling fact: I am not alone. For a moment, the entire room holds its breath. The lamp beside me hums. The curtains sway slightly from the draft. The shadows don't shift, but my pulse does. I stand perfectly still, listening. Years of courtroom instincts sharpen inside me like a blade being pulled from its sheath. I know the difference between a house settling and a footstep. And this was no settling. This was intentional. Someone stepped, stopped, and waited. I reach out and quietly close the evidence box, sliding it toward me as if I'm protecting a child. The returned file lies open on my desk, Daniel's name glowing faintly on the envelope, the photograph of Alina and Daniel near the edge, the timestamp pressed into its back like a mark from another world. Another sound. Not a creak this time. A soft exhale from the hallway. I turn off the lamp. Darkness swallows the room instantly, except for the faint silver glow slipping through the curtains. My heartbeat slows, not from fear, but from calculation. Whoever is here has already entered my home. They didn't break anything. They didn't rush. They moved with the quiet patience of someone who knows exactly where they're going, and I know where they're heading, the study. Because everything, every page, every clue, every secret ends up here. I step back from the desk, careful not to brush the chair or the table. My eyes adjust slowly. My breathing steadies. The hallway beyond the open study door is a strip of darkness that feels too alive. I listen again. Silence. But silence is how some people announce themselves. Then suddenly a faint rhythmic tapping. Tappy, tappy, pause. Tap, 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 pause. The pattern is deliberate, too careful to be accidental. Then I realize what it is, someone's fingers quietly touching the wall as they walk their way toward me as if counting steps. Whoever they aren't rushing. They want me to know they're coming. I move slowly toward the edge of the room until I stand beside the bookshelf. From here, I can see the hallway more clearly. A shadow moves, just a shift of darker darkness, no face, no details, just presence. Close enough to be in the house, far enough not to reveal themselves. And then a voice. A whisper, soft, low, almost familiar. Eliner, I freeze, not because someone spoke, but because of the tone. Someone saying my name in my house in the dark like they've said it before. The whisper isn't threatening, it's sad, heavy, as if pulled up from somewhere with dust and regret tucked into the syllables. I step forward just enough for my silhouette to touch the hallway light. "Who's there?" I ask, my voice quieter than I expected, not out of fear, but respect. Whoever knows my name in this moment is connected to the file, to Daniel, to everything I've uncovered. The shadow doesn't move, but the whisper comes again. "You missed something." The same sentence that was on the paper in room 412. I shift slightly, angling my head so I can see the faint outline more clearly. Taller than Alina, too tall to be her. His shoulders are broad, posture slightly bent forward, not in threat but in exhaustion. And then I realize something that sends a tremor up my spine. The shadow is standing exactly where the floorboard creaked. Exactly where someone would stand if they knew the house better than I thought. "Who are you?" I ask again, this time more steady, my lawyer voice slipping in. The shadow hesitates and then steps slightly into the dim glow from the street outside. And my heart stops. It's not Mark Ridley, and it's not Daniel Moore, not fully, not the man I remember, but the eyes, the shape of the face, the slope of the shoulders, it's him. Older, thinner, worn. A ghost of the man who once sat in my office 14 years ago. "Daniel?" I breathe, the word barely forming. He takes another small step, and in that second, everything collapses inward: the missing logs, the torn witness statement, the timestamp, Alina's disappearance, the reconstructed file. He lived, and he hid, and he has come back for the file he once protected with his life. His voice trembles as he speaks again. "They know you're looking," he whispers, glancing behind him down the hallway. "They've always known. They're watching the case again." My knees almost give, but I brace myself on the bookshelf. "Daniel, what happened to you? Where did you go? Why didn't you?" He lifts one trembling hand to silence me. "I never left," he says softly. "I never ran. I hid the evidence because I had to. Alina helped me. Ridley found out. She didn't survive long after that. My breath catches. Alina, is she gone? He whispers. Because she sent you that statement. Because she saw us in the hallway. Because she tried to warn you. A cold sorrow punches through my ribs. And you, I ask, my voice breaking just slightly. Why reappear now? Why bring the file back? Daniel steps closer, his face now faintly illuminated, gaunt, lined, but alive. Because, he says quietly, Ridley's retiring, and when he retires, the truth dies with him. He looks down at the evidence box on my desk, the shadow of his expression tightening with grief, fear, and something else, resolve. You're the only one who kept looking, Alina, the only one who never let it go. The air between us tightens. A single truth rising from the silence, he came to finish what he started. But before I speak, before I can even move, Daniel suddenly turns his head sharply toward the dark hallway, eyes widening in terror. Footsteps, fast, heavy, inside the house. He whispers one last sentence, one that rips straight through the night. They found me. Some files return even when they were never meant to. The line drifts through my mind as every instinct inside me tightens, because Daniel's whisper, "They found me," is not a warning. It is a certainty, a truth sharpened by fear, a truth sharpened by time. For a heartbeat, the house holds still. The air freezes. The silence thickens. Then I hear it again, footsteps, fast and purposeful, not the hesitant kind of someone sneaking inside, but the determined stride of someone who has followed Daniel for years. Someone who knows exactly why he came here tonight. Daniel moves quickly, not in panic, but with the instinct of someone who has survived far too long in shadows. He steps forward, gripping my arm with a hand colder than winter, his breath trembling as he forces out the words. "You have to listen to me, Alina. We don't have much time." I nod, my pulse hammering beneath my skin. He looks older now, not just in years, but in miles. His face is lined with exhaustion, his eyes hollow from nights spent hiding. But there is something else there too, a stubborn flame still burning. A man who was supposed to disappear long ago but refused to be erased completely. "How did you survive?" I whisper, my voice barely audible. He allows himself a single, shaky exhale. "I didn't survive," he says quietly. "Not the person I was. That man is gone. The only thing that kept me alive was the truth and the fact that I couldn't let Ridley destroy you the way he destroyed Alina." The footsteps grow closer, slow now, measured. Daniel's eyes widen, fear and resolve fighting inside them. "We need to talk before he reaches this door." Ridley. The name is a blade slicing through the dark. I take Daniel's arm and pull him deeper into the study, closing the door gently behind us. The lock clicks softly, the kind of lock designed for privacy, not protection. It will buy us seconds, nothing more. Daniel moves toward the desk, his eyes scanning the open file like a man searching for pieces of himself. When his fingers touch the photograph of him and Alina, his entire body trembles. He lifts it, staring at the frozen moment he once lived, the one someone captured without his knowledge. "She tried," he whispers. "She tried to warn you. She tried to protect me, and Ridley, he saw her as a liability." A cold shiver runs through my spine. "What did he do to her?" I ask softly. Daniel closes his eyes, jaw tightening. "He silenced her, called it a transfer. But she never reached the next office." My breath catches. A sting builds behind my eyes. "Alina left this for me, didn't she?" I ask, touching the torn witness statement. Daniel nods. "She left it on my desk the night everything changed. She knew Ridley was closing in. She said if anything happened to her, she wanted someone to know the truth. The footsteps stop outside the study door. Silence. A pause that feels like a loaded gun aimed at the other side of the wood. Daniel continues, speaking faster now. Before the file disappeared, I found something in the internal system, numbers that didn't just shift. They were being rewritten. Purposefully, someone was siphoning funds through the reporting system, tiny amounts over years, enough to go unnoticed, but together, he shakes his head. Millions? My eyes widen. This was bigger than Daniel, bigger than a simple accusation. And Ridley, I ask. Daniel looks at me with a sadness that almost pulls the floor out from under me. He orchestrated everything. He needed a fall guy, someone low enough on the ladder that no one would ask questions. Someone with system access but no connections. Someone who wouldn't be missed if he vanished. The truth hits like a strike to the ribs. Daniel, he didn't just frame you, he hunted you. Daniel nods silently. I confronted him, Daniel says. I asked him why the logs didn't match, why the same timestamp kept appearing. He told me to forget it, to let the numbers go, and when I said no, he made sure I had nowhere left to run. The study door handle moves. A slow, deliberate twist. Daniel grabs my wrist. Eleanor, listen to me. You're the only reason I stayed alive this long. You kept looking, you kept asking questions, you never let the past fully die. He reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out something small, a flash drive. The same shape, same silver metal, but newer. This has everything, he whispers. The original logs, the real ones. Alina made copies before Ridley erased them. I kept them hidden for 14 years. I waited for the right time. I stare at the drive, my breathing shallow. Why now? Daniel's voice breaks. Because Ridley is retiring tomorrow, and once he steps down, the chain of custody closes forever. The system loses its last living witness. He swallows hard. I can't let that happen. The study door shakes lightly, a test push. Daniel's voice softens, almost a plea. Eleanor, when I disappeared, I wasn't running from the law. I was running from him, from Ridley, from the same people he worked for, people who knew what we found, people who couldn't risk the truth coming out. I feel a cold, creeping dread rise in my stomach. Daniel, why did you come to me? Why not the authorities? His answer is immediate. Because they're watching the authorities too. The door handle turns again, harder this time. Daniel's eyes snap toward it. We're out of time. A single breath passes between us. A silent agreement, a truth that can no longer be buried. He steps closer, gripping my shoulders. If anything happens to me tonight, you must finish this case. Bring the truth forward. Don't let Ridley retire into silence. Don't let Alina's death be forgotten. Tears burn behind my eyes, angry, hot, unstoppable. Daniel, I whisper, I won't let you disappear again. He opens his mouth to respond, but the door slams violently from the outside, jolting us both. A deep voice echoes through the wood. Eleanor, open the door, we need to talk. Daniel's hand slips from my arm, his face drains of color. It's him, he whispers, another slam stronger. The hinges strain, the frame shudders. Ridley's voice grows deeper, colder. You've had that file long enough. Daniel steps backward, the shadows swallowing him again. Eleanor, he says, breath trembling, whatever happens now, keep the drive safe, promise me. My heart stops. My breath burns, I nod, slow, steady, certain. I promise. The door cracks. And in that split second, as the wood splinters and the room trembles under the weight of someone who believes he has already won, I realize. This isn't the end of the case. This is the beginning of the truth. Some files return even when they were never meant to. I whisper the line because in this moment, standing between the splintered door and the man I once trusted, it feels less like a warning and more like prophecy. The door cracks again, wood splitting under Ridley's weight as he forces his way in. The room trembles. Daniel steps back into the corner, trying to keep himself hidden from the line of sight just long enough for me to understand what's at stake. He survived 14 years in shadows. He can survive a few seconds more. The door bursts open. Mark Ridley stands framed in the doorway, breath steady, eyes cold, the same expression he used in courtrooms when he spoke lies with a calmness that could have fooled an entire jury. But tonight, he isn't pretending. Tonight, his mask has fallen. "Eleanor," he says, voice dangerously even, step away from the desk. I don't move, I don't blink. Ridley glances around the room, eyes scanning shelves, shadows, walls. He doesn't see Daniel yet, not fully, just enough movement to make him tense. "You shouldn't have opened that file," Ridley says, his voice dropping lower. "It was closed years ago." "That's the problem," I reply. "It should never have been closed." Ridley steps forward, and in that moment, Daniel finally emerges from the shadows. The flickering hallway light catches his face, drawn, tired, but unmistakably alive. Ridley freezes. "You," he breathes. "You were supposed to disappear." Daniel straightens, voice shaking but firm. "You tried, but I kept the truth. Alina kept the truth, and now Eleanor has it." Ridley's expression doesn't crack, it shatters. Years of calculated composure crumble in a single second. "You think anyone will believe you?" Ridley spits. "You're a ghost, a man who vanished, a man with no records, no address, no proof of life." Daniel steps closer. "I don't need records, I have the evidence. And Eleanor has it now too." Ridley's eyes flick toward me. He realizes it, the flash drive is already in my pocket. The evidence he buried is out of his grasp. "You can't win," he says quietly, almost sadly. Daniel shakes his head. "We already have." Before Ridley can move, before he can lunge forward, before he can snatch the file or strike out in desperation, the red and blue lights flash through my window. A growing glow, a growing sound, sirens, multiple, loud, near. Ridley turns sharply toward the door. I take a slow breath. "Daniel activated the panic alert," I say softly. "It's connected to the old courthouse system." "You forgot that, didn't you?" Ridley's face twists with realization. He didn't expect Daniel to have access to anything anymore. He didn't expect me to still know the codes. He didn't expect the past to rise up and choke him. Heavy boots pound down the hallway. Voices shout commands. Ridley makes one last attempt, one desperate step toward the file on my desk. But it's too late. Officers flood the study, forcing him to the ground. His wrists snap together under cuffs. He struggles, but it means nothing. The truth has arrived. Daniel watches silently, chest rising and falling in sharp breaths. His eyes glisten not from fear this time, but from release. A freedom so heavy it almost buckles him. Ridley spits venom as he's pulled to his feet. "You're both finished," he snarls. "No one will believe. All evidence has been recorded," an officer interrupts. "And we have your archived clearance logs, everything lines up." Ridley's breath leaves him in a single stunned exhale, because for the first time he understands. His timeline has collapsed. They drag him out of the house, his voice fading into nothing as the hallway swallows him. The moment he disappears through the front door, Daniel slumps into the nearest chair, trembling from adrenaline and grief and years of silence finally cracking open. I sit beside him. It takes him a long time to speak. Alina wanted this, he whispers. She wanted you to know, she wanted the truth to live somewhere safe. I nod, feeling tears sting the corners of my eyes. Her message, I say softly, was never meant to stay in dust. Daniel looks down at the file, the pages old and new woven together like two versions of the same life. He touches the edge gently as if honoring it. What happens now? He asks. I lift the flash drive from my pocket. Now, I tell him, we finish this case properly. The next week unfolds like the slow turning of a heavy wheel. Evidence is logged, statements taken, hidden documents scanned, Alina's torn note preserved, and Daniel, after 14 years of living like a ghost, finally steps into daylight, publicly, fearfully, bravely. When Ridley stands in court, the same courtroom he once ruled with lies, he looks smaller, diminished. A man whose carefully constructed world has collapsed under the weight of truth. The judge reads out the charges: fraud, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, conspiracy, and a special count for the disappearance of Alina Carter. Daniel stands behind me, silent, steady, present. When the verdict is read, guilty on all counts, he exhales a breath that has been trapped inside him for 14 years. Outside the courthouse, cameras flash, reporters push forward, microphones rise. One asks Daniel, "Why come back now?" Daniel looks at me first, and for the first time, his eyes don't hold fear but peace. "Because," he says, voice steady, "the truth waited long enough." And then they ask me, "Miss Hayes, what will you do now?" I smile softly, a quiet smile, a tired smile, a victorious smile. "I'll do what I should have done 14 years ago," I say. "I'll tell the story." That evening, back in my study, I sit at my desk facing the file one last time. The room is quiet. The lamp glows warm. I press the cover gently, fingers resting on Daniel's name. "Some files return," I whisper, "even when they were never meant to." This time there is no fear in my voice, only truth, only closure. Because the file returned, not to haunt me, but to finish what Alina started and what Daniel survived to witness. For whoever finds this story next, I leave you with one final message, hers, not mine. The truth is only dangerous when left in the dark. And tonight, the truth finally stood in the light.